Hi guys, I wanted to get on here and I tried to make this video earlier, but I'm going to retry to make it now because I wasn't very clear. I hadn't gone through, I think, the mechanics of the debate adequately, the hypothetical debate I was having in my head. And I wanted to go through that now, but in any case, it's about addressing flat Earth conspiracies. And, uh, and this has been debunked and, most, uh, with clear empirical data indicates that the conspiracy is just a conspiracy. Calling it a conspiracy is, to me, kind of an odd word to use for it, but I really can't think of I guess I'd call it the flat earth superstition rather than the flat earth conspiracy. And um, so the question is, someone who renounces empirical evidence and is not an empiricist, strictly speaking, in their thinking, which is fine, right? One can be logical and at the same time, one can be empirical and also be logical, or one can be unempirical and also be logical. So um, it's just a difference. It's a thinking style. It's a difference in thinking style. One can certainly, as I said, be logical and unempirical, and Descartes would fall into that category of being logical but not necessarily being an empiricist. He didn't necessarily believe his sensory experience was necessarily conveying any objective reality, and that his sensory experience was, in some sense, illusory and didn't convey any objective truth. And when you begin to go down the Descartesian and the Cartesian rabbit hole, and you go deeply enough, you end up in somewhat mind-boggling cognitive situations where riddling out the answer is impossible, and one can only raise questions. And this probably is my most favorite kind of thinking, but if I'm in the proper mood for it. Now, here's the thing. Someone who renounces empirical evidence, you're going to have to approach the issue of a flat, the concept and debate against the idea of a flat Earth with logic rather than empirical evidence. And because these people simply renounce the reality of empiricism and the validity of they're just not empirical in their thinking about this. And it probably doesn't even go that deep. I think most of those who hold to the idea of a flat Earth are simply, not only rejecting a consensus, they are rejecting. They're not thinking about the issue logically. Now, how would I handle or try to persuade someone? I had this idea a while back. You know, how do I handle or try to persuade someone who believes the Earth is flat? And look, I know that this seems like a kind of a uh, insignificant topic to discuss, but trying to persuade someone, the strategy of the strategy that goes into persuasion, I think is very interesting for me to think about. And ultimately, sometimes debates can kind of play out like a game of chess, and you can anticipate the other side's rebuttal before even making your argument, and then construct the argument such that it deflects the rebuttal. And you know, I think that's a very fun activity to engage in. It's hard to do. I think it takes a lot of hard thinking, and I call it hard thinking for a reason. But in any case, um, so here's the question I would ask someone that believes, who is logical, right? Who believes that the Earth is flat, right? Or maybe doesn't believe it, maybe speculates that it is, or simply renounces that the Earth is spherical rather than flat, and doesn't hold to any sure beliefs on the issue. Um, so, so what is the question that I would ask them? So I would ask this: if the Earth is flat, what is it resting on, right? So um, hopefully I'm audible, right? Probably wasn't. I'll go back and inspect the stream after posting it to make sure that I was audible, although probably wasn't. In any case, we'll continue and then see. because the mic was down here, so probably was still able to record all of the audio. So in any case, um, you know, so if the Earth is flat, see, so if they're an unempirical person, how do you persuade them? If they're more of a Cartesian thinker, uh, how do you persuade them? How do you lead them to maybe more refined conclusions about whether the Earth is spherical or flat? And you ask them, you know, if the Earth is flat, what is it resting on? And you can kind of see if you take that question, it leads them in the direction of recognizing that the Earth is not totally flat, right? Because if it has to be resting on something, then it isn't totally flat. So, asking that question is very helpful in the discussion if the person is logical but unempirical. And so if the Earth is flat, what is it resting on, right? And that gets them to think about, oh, it's got to be resting on something. And if they're a logical person, they'll recognize, oh, okay, well, if the Earth has to be resting on something, then it's not totally flat. So um, now they could easily just as respond to that. The Earth doesn't have to be resting on something because it's suspended by gravity, right? And and the thing is when you get that retort, which is a pretty sophisticated retort, how do you deal with it, right? To lead them in the direction of what seems to be the reality. If again they're logical but unempirical, um, they might say. So then you respond, okay. Well, you then accept the existence of gravity. Why do you accept the existence of gravity? And they'll say something like, well, because there's I have everyday empirical experience that hence you back them into a corner because then it reveals that they have an implicit recognition of the validity of empirical evidence. And so then you could just easily say, okay, well, you accept gravity as an empirical fact. Why not then let's go explore the Earth and travel the circumference of the Earth and go and try to find the edges of this flat Earth that we're on. And if this empirical investigation reveals that there are no edges, then it would reveal that the Earth is not flat. And so you back them into a corner that way. Now, you could also respond to the retort that, it's the Earth doesn't have to be resting on something because it's suspended by gravity in another way. Well, regardless, the Earth, whether or not it's suspended by gravity, would still have to have some sort of foundation to it. It is impossible that it is completely flat. And at that point, again, it leads them in the same direction, the same cognitive direction, where they at least have to concede that regardless, the Earth is not totally flat. And with that question, you can lead them in the direction via logic rather than empirical evidence that the Earth is spherical, or at least that it is not flat. So these are my thoughts, and I call it a Socratic silver bullet because there are these instances in a debate where the whole thing can be resolved via a process of Socratic questioning. Asking an effective question will cause your opposition to then question their premises and their model of the issue. And that may lead them in the direction of perhaps a more logical conclusion or a logically optimal conclusion. So, I mean, this is just my thinking on people that think, maybe don't necessarily believe that the Earth is flat, but perhaps uh, do not believe that the Earth is necessarily spherical or not flat. So, regardless, um, it's very fun to me to in debates, at least when the opportunity arises. And rarely, if we're having a debate about something, it's a more complicated issue and can't be resolved with any kind of Socratic silver bullet because it's too complicated. And in this case, the debate seems very easily resolved via that method of Socratic questioning. You just have to lead them in the direction. If they're a logical person but unempirical, which is possible, and it's an important distinction to make, then you may lead them in the direction of, you know, a conclusion that the Earth is not flat uh, via the presentation of logic rather than empirical evidence. So their renunciation of empirical evidence, um, although they may not renounce it totally, again, they may believe in gravity. Regardless, I think it's a very interesting question to ask, and I'll end on that note. If the Earth is flat, what is it resting on? Thanks for watching.